Did you know that Pepsi actually once owned warships? Like actual proper warships? The origins of Pepsi's naval adventures dates right back to 1959, when the US and the USSR both agreed to hold cultural exhibitions in each other's countries to try and showcase their lifestyles and achievements and stuff. And while Khrushchev was in the US, he tried Pepsi, fell in love with it, and the taste for it never really went away. So Pepsi became a bit of a fan favourite in the Soviet Union, and in the 1970s, Pepsi became one of the first Western products to be legally sold in the Soviet Union. But here was the big catch with it. The Soviets used a currency called the rubles, and these were completely useless outside of the USSR. So it then brings about the big question, how do they pay for the Pepsi that they want? So they came to a bit of a deal where Pepsi would receive Soviet vodka, and they would then sell this vodka into the American marketplace, and in exchange, the Soviets would get Pepsi. And this arrangement worked very well for both sides. Pepsi were able to expand their sales into a growing market, and the Soviet vodka was able to enter into a new market too. But during the 80s, things started to shift. The USSR wanted more and more and more, but the American appetite for vodka was really waning, and the Americans were starting to impose restrictions on Soviet products, which included vodka, and so that massively limited the selling potential in the US. So Pepsi's CEO, he flew over to Moscow to meet with Soviet officials to deal with this travesty. He asked for $3 million for the Soviets to buy his syrup, but of course the Soviets still had no way to pay. So the Soviets made a very interesting offer. They offered 17 submarines, a cruiser, a destroyer, and a frigate, actual military vessels, in exchange for Pepsi. And the offer was accepted. So for a very, very brief while, Pepsi had more naval firepower than a lot of countries. Or so the headlines say. The vessels in reality were actually very old and obsolete, and were never actually intended to be used for any kind of naval purposes. The idea that made its way around the internet that Pepsi was some kind of naval superpower is just not true. That was purely clickbait. The ships were a means to get cash. Pepsi very quickly sold these ships for scraps, and it was a business deal. But of course that's not what sticks around in the headlines. So yes, Pepsi once had its own naval fleet.